Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. If you sign up there, you'll get an email that will give you instructions on how to go up the mountain and across the rickety bridge and through the dangerous forest to get to Mukana, where you can ask questions. We have general discussion for the first hour. Second hour, we spend a little more time on something specific. And today we'll talk about Office Hours 2.0, what's changed, and how we're kind of moving forward. Tomorrow we have Hovercast. They're actually going to come on, and their CEO and some of their tech folks are going to be on here to talk to us about what they do. So it should be pretty exciting. So stay tuned for that. And then Saturday, of course, is the long day education. We don't put that on YouTube. So you have to be here at 8 o'clock. That's where you have to go through Mukana and all the other bits and pieces and Zoom. And then at 11, we will broadcast Cooking with Damayanti Gajar. We're going to make savory pancakes. I highly recommend playing along. You don't have to turn the camera on, but I would cook along with us. And if you feel like coming in with a camera, even just a webcam or your phone, it's really, really a lot of fun. I would highly recommend it. At noon, we'll have the Belfast method, which, by the way, was on NPR today, or this week, Tuesday. But we'll be at Todd Reynolds' house, taking over his equipment and running a stream at noon. So stay tuned for that on Saturday. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
Andy Carluccio has our first one from here in the panel in Washington, D.C., and he writes, YouTube has announced that they will be hiding the dislike scores on videos. Will this hurt the viewer experience or protect the creators?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think this is a great thing. I think YouTube has looked into what's been happening over Facebook, and they know that with all the cancel culture that's going on, that they had to do something with the like-dislike. It's the one feature that a lot of YouTubers dislike, pun intended, and it absolutely did nothing. It didn't tell you, give you any information. Now, you'll still be able to dislike things. You just won't be able to see how many dislikes that are on there. So nobody's going to try and game the system, so to speak. So I think it's, like I said, it's been something that I've been waiting for to happen, and I'm glad that it is happening.
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, Jeffrey's positive comment about this is the first I've frankly heard. A lot of creators, I looked at the actual video that announced it. Before they removed it, there was a huge dislike showing that the public disliked what they were seeing. I agree that, cancel culture is poisonous, and sure, YouTube has to do something about it. But it seems that things that we were able to tell when someone's trying to scam you by giving you something disingenuous, that's something that's going to be hidden. Is it an inevitable thing? I don't know, but it didn't seem to be too popular with all of the feedback I've looked at YouTube so far.
Go ahead, Bill.
The internet and all of this is so complex that I don't think simple solutions are going to ever fix this. There's just too much power and too much money and too much influence floating around with these gigantic aggregated communities. And, this is really changing the entire world. So I think it's going to be a professional group studying this and coming up with some sort of rules of the road is going to be necessary across all these platforms, or it's just going to continue to get worse and worse. That's my personal feeling.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well said, Bill. I agree. Haters want to hate. And we need to get away from this. This is just a ongoing thing that people are getting excited about, being able to vote on something that they have no business voting on. So I'm glad that it's going that way. I think it makes a lot of sense. The adult thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's they're just playing. To be honest, it's a joke, really. This small thing they're doing. They really wanted to do something to make it more, the comments less of a cesspit, or the voting proper. Is to put in a proper system where people have to properly identify who they are, and not being able to sign on with made up names and made up pictures. That's the real thing that would fix this, not this playing to the crowd.
They tried that. I think it was 2013 or 2014. They tried to move everybody to real names, and they had mass insurrection. And then they backed down. And at that point, it was never going to work. Like you're absolutely right, Ken. But when YouTube gave up on real names, when they tried it, and when they gave up on real names, they gave up on the ability to really maintain any positive control over their over their system. So that was the time, that was the moment that they said, we're never going to have this actually work. And so everything is going to be small potatoes after that. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Why did that cycle? Anyway, says, what would be an alternative to the ubiquitous blue light background?
Go ahead, Charles.
So technically you could use any color that you wish, but it just depends on what kind of separation you want. If you're having let's say like a subject, like a person, right? And you're trying to separate them from everything else that's going on. Usually what we've all done for the most part is find a cooler tone opposite in the color wheel just to help that separation. Because the first separation the brain recognizes is contrast, right? But then the second one is color. And that's the easiest thing that you can do. That's why you have a lot of concerts where the background will be bluish, and then the hues and the tones and the warmth of the talent will actually pop, right? But if you want to experiment with some other colors, just make sure that your camera is as balanced as possible. And what I mean by that is that any color that you will have on set will sit properly in its space. So you'll have good color separation. And a good way to test that is if you have a gray background, just completely neutral, will tell you if you're in the right place or if you're biased, warm or cool. So you could test that. But you could technically, use any color, but just play around with it. See
Go ahead, Ken.
What you like.
Yep, Ken.
Yeah, when I look at this in HDR on my XDR display, then I look at things like changing to like what Rupert or John or Guy or Tom or Josh have in their background. That really does pop. And so, yeah, that's what I'll be looking to change to, more realistic or more lights or a more interesting background than a solid color.
Yeah, I'm trying to prepare for the next version. I'm waiting for Thanksgiving week to do my big flip. So, I'm going to probably put some stuff back there that will have highlights and things. And so my basic gray background will still be available. I can bring it in if I want to use it, but I'm going to put some shelves up to make that work. So anyway, but I think that something realistic back there works. But to what everyone else's point, I've moved to cool colors for a long time because it just makes people look better. Next question.
Richard Lavery in Belfast in the UK, our friend, says, has anyone tried the new Vimeo webinar system? And if so, what do you think?
I don't know if anyone's tested it yet. I didn't even know it existed. Evidently, it's very new. And I guess if you're not in the Vimeo world, it may not be as clear. Go ahead, Guy. Oh, can't hear you, Guy.
That happens when I switch computers. Sorry, I switched to my Mac so I can show you just the basics of the back end. It looks kind of like a Streamyard or a OBS where you're adding speakers. So I think you can get up to 8 speakers. Then you could switch to them. You can do 2-ups, 4-ups. I think 8 or 9 is the max. And then one of the cool things is that it does have polls, so you can create polls, and it does have Q&As that will appear on the screen, so you can add the Q&A to the scenes, and you switch between the scenes. And you can not only use Vimeo, but you can, if you've upgraded, you can go to RTMP to a different place like YouTube or whatever. But it is very simple. I mean, it's you're adding speakers, you're sending the speakers links, so you send them an email address, you send them an email with the generate, and that generates the invite link, and then they come in with their mic and camera. But yeah, add your slideshows, lower thirds, your branding, and when you click on a person, you can add their lower third when they're there, like show lower third comes in, send a stream, goes out. Yeah, it's the basics of it.
It looks cool. We should definitely do some more testing on it. I think that it also provides, the rest of their platform actually works very well for corporate distribution. And so they've got a lot of tools already there. So it's a smart move on their part. Next question.
Ray Harwood in Avondale, Arizona says, what event registration entry points do you use? Zoom, Eventbrite, or something else perhaps? Alex?
Guy, sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
My fault.
There we go. Okay. I use onZoom as an event organizer. I'm currently using the onZoom experience, but what would be more important is what is the user experience? And I know John Preto has come in through that for us. So I'd be curious to hear what John's experience is.
Go ahead, Rupert.
It can depend a little bit on whether you're talking about entry point for a Zoom event or a Zoom webinar or something that's actually taking place on Zoom, because the Zoom registration process itself for a webinar or meeting probably provides the tightest integration to get into Zoom as an entry point, not necessarily the richest data or promoting type features, which something like Eventbrite would do. But the challenge really comes is what detail of data you really want to pull out of that after the fact, who attended or how long did they stay, and things that you may want to enable to prevent them from sharing those links and things like that. So I think that's just something we'll see get better and better with Zoom events.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, about a year, looking and evaluating. We actually used Eventbrite for a client last year, and it didn't meet their needs. Every time we talk to a client, they have very specific requirements on billing, so we ended up writing our own. We just used it the last 2 days. Doug and I and Chris have been in an event, and it worked very smoothly, sold a lot of tickets, and everything went well. So we are all custom.
One thing to look at is Obvio. That's a homegrown here in office hours from folks that are in office hours, Blue and Grant and other folks putting it together. And they have a lot of really good tools for registration and management, and they really tie deeply into Zoom. So if you're looking at Zoom as a front end, I would check out Obvio as well. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota says, at the end of our Sanctuary AV installation, the integrator gives us a 3-hour training. How to get the most from this?
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, my signal's not good. Take lots of notes and get lots of volunteers.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Exactly. Record it if you can. Audio and video would be great. Bring as many people from your team as you can and try and get some of that knowledge downloaded into their brains, not only just in notes and recording, but try and get as many people orientated as you can. Try and pre-arm yourself and your team with questions and try and keep it interactive. Make sure you're getting training on the parts of the system that you want. You may be familiar with some aspects and less so with others. So get the trainer to focus on what you want. Make sure at the end of it, you're getting copies of any paperwork, documentation, operation and maintenance information, and contact information for warranty or support or anything like that.
Good, Bill.
Just a little side note, but if you have volunteer operators, one of the most important things I always found with non-professionals, I mean, sit in the seat everyday operators, was to label everything incredibly clearly. That's pull out your P-Touch or whatever you're going to use and make sure that they know you start here with step 1, step 2, step 3, and that any volunteer stepping in to cover a show can look at the process and follow it through and at least get the basics going.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone else said. Along with that, don't let the trainer touch anything. Let the individuals that are actually going to be doing the job, let him tell them what to do. And same thing everyone said about being prepared.
The last thing I would say is just try to get a larger group than your normal group to come watch and listen to the trainer, so that you're asking questions and you're spreading out that knowledge into a wider group than the people that are just the regulars. There's a real difficulty sometimes with volunteer staff to not think of who are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th people in the string of TDs and audio folks. You want to train all of them and give them all opportunities where you can, because you need to have backups, especially in a volunteer staff. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis is next, and he says, home recording with 2 electric guitars and 1 vocalist in one take. How to do so without forcing the vocalist to sing super loudly? Would you amplify the singer just as a monitor? If you keep guitars at very low volume, do you sacrifice tone and get more hum?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll answer the last question first. Not necessarily, assuming you've got a really high quality recording. The part that I don't understand about this is 1 take is no problem. Is it only 1 channel? I mean, that would mess stuff up quite a bit, no matter how you do it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So what I would do is, first of all, if you've got a place that has a lot of furniture in there, I'd put the furniture in between the guitarist and the singer. Separate as much as you can. So guitarist in one corner, caddy corner, you have your vocalist. maybe even turn the amplifiers towards the wall so that sound, and going towards like cushions or anything like that so it stops right there. Getting the singer farther away, if you can put them in the bathroom, even if you have to put a whole bunch of clothes to take out the reverb out of the bathroom, that'll work as well if they absolutely need to be in the same room to do this recording. Other than that, you might want to record it and then re-record tracks just so you can get the right sound.
Good. Chris?
You need a minimum of a 2-bedroom house to do this, because what you should do is you should put one guitar amp in each bedroom and let them turn up. Guitar amps sound better loud. They do. And so let them turn it up, close the door, run a cable out to the living room, and put the singer and the 2 guitarists in there, but leave their amps there. Put everybody on headphones and give them a mix so they can hear what they need to hear. But what most people will do is they'll isolate amps in another room, or sometimes even in a box. I've seen that done on stage where people will roll in a box, has their little, Vox 20 or Vox 30, whatever in it with microphones in the box, but they don't even take the lid off sometimes.
We had one where because we were doing surround, we didn't want a lot of cross talk between all the instruments, and we really leaned heavily into in-ear monitors and post-processing, and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen, because I hadn't thought about what it would look like. So someone was on electronic drums, and then we had guitarists and a keyboardist and the singer, and all you could hear was the singer singing, and you hear this little clink 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 clink, and and then you put the in-ear monitors in, and there's like the whole thing was going, and then you take the headset off and ding, 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 ding. And it for surround it worked amazingly well. Like it just because it was I don't know if it sounded the same as the amps, but it was it really sounded cool because we could put those instruments anywhere and they didn't crosstalk at all. Next question.
Our friend Tony Mobley in Newton, Georgia, and here on the panel says, how do I get more questions from the audience during conversations with Tony Mobley? Is joining Mukana an issue for non-office hours people?
Go ahead, David.
I was honored to be with Tony last night, and I would suggest that it is. Mukana is great when you have an existing community that knows how to use it, is comfortable using it. For the average viewer, I think it's a hurdle that they sometimes struggle to overcome to find their way in. But I would also suggest, Tony, that what you're really good at is the conversation piece. I don't think that your show needs to be you reading a bunch of questions. I think you do great work when you really engage with people and converse with them. And so that's what I'd love to see more of.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the questions are, if you look at what we do in office hours here, we have the benefit, we have a Douglas. So he's a genius at being able to come up with questions. So seeding your questions is really a key. So people can get an idea of what kind of things to ask or to need to be asked. And so seeding your version of Mukana might help.
Good, Tony.
So what's been happening over the last several weeks of conversation with Tony Mobley is that, for the most part, most of the questions are mine. And I've been helped by Dr. Chris Clark and Roscoe and Guy and a lot of the office hours members and Talak by putting in questions. But for the most part, all the questions are mine. And so I was just wondering if I needed to push a little bit more on the promotion videos that I'm doing to advertise the show. Now, as far as next week, I'm not concerned about the questions because Vienna Tran, the space doctor, will be on. And so I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of great questions for her. But going forward, I'm really concerned about getting a little bit more audience engagement.
You go ahead, Chris.
I got to host a panel at the Final Cut Global Summit the other day. And one of the things that I did at the very beginning of the hour is I engaged everybody. I said, hey, by the way, let's make sure this thing is working. If you can find the Q&A panel, just tell me what city you're in, and immediately, like literally, like it started taking off. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I think that we have to sort of acknowledge that, you know, what we're doing here is weird. It's weird. We're playing on the internet, and you just kind of have to address it as such. I think we want everything to be smooth and slick and sexy and television, whatever, but it's kind of weird. So I thought it worked really well to kind of just engage people like that. And it worked quite well. I mean, we had way more questions than we could handle in the hour that they gave us.
Yeah, the thing that we recommend for folks all the time is to get questions in early. So there's a temptation to go, we're going to have a conversation for the first 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions. And from a Q&A perspective, that's a disaster. You know, so you have to ask, if you're committing to questions and you want to see more questions, you want to come out of the gate with questions, you know. So this gets back into what Ken was talking about, seeding, you know, encouraging people to send questions in early. Say, hey, we had a couple questions before the show. Here's one of the questions, and like start an introduction, 5 or 10 minutes, and then start seeding in those questions. And then you can still keep on asking your questions. You just have to decide what kind of show you want to do. As David said, you're very good. I mean, as a recipient of it, you're very good at asking the questions. And so you have to decide what you want your show to look like. If you decide you want to commit to more questions, you have to bring them on the show all the time. That's what we do here. You have to be constantly going back to the audience. If you leave them for a while, they'll just stop asking questions and they'll disengage, you know? And so you just have to figure out whether that's a priority or not. Go ahead, Tony.
So, I'm really dealing with two different formats. The first format is the one-on-one conversation, which I think goes very well.
Right.
But a conversation like we had last panel discussion like we had last night, I think is in fact a forum for more than just a one-on-one conversation. So there are different topics,
right,
and groups that I will be having conversations with that I need to have a variety of different ways of engaging the audience. And so I guess that's part of what I'm wrestling with. And so
and
I want
remember
to
that
say thank you.
The other thing is you have to train your audience over time. Remember that you've done how many? 10 or 12?
21.
Oh, 21? Holy smokes, you've done so many. 21. But, you know, it took us probably the first 50 to 100 before we really had a groove going with people asking questions in office hours. So you just want to remember that repetition is important, and you're doing it, you know, your iteration rate's a little slower. And so you got to figure out a way to get that critical mass. Definitely work with your whoever's going to be on to make sure that they're promoting it, you know, through their pipeline of whoever's following them and whoever knows, because bringing people on externally, the big opportunity is to bring their audience with them. And you want to make sure that they're promoting it out to their audience. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I was going to say that exactly. The synergy that you can get from, like last night, Leo at the last minute, I mean, 2 minutes to air. Come on, Leo. He's like, hey, how can I push this to my Facebook group? And I'm like, dude, like you waited till the last minute to get this hook. Like we could have had this, because I know he's got a pretty good following, and we could have pushed the show over to a new audience or somebody that hadn't seen Tony before. And ideally, Tony could have said, hey, you know, go to this YouTube channel, subscribe, and you gain that synergy and those followers. And that's part of the way that the world works. And you gain other people's audiences.
And part of it is that you really have to build a machine around it. Here's what you want to send. Here's like literally send them what they can tweet out. You know, like all you have to do is cut and paste it. Be very careful of that. So I almost never use what people send me because it's too salesy. Like it's just too, you know, and I'm just like, who wrote this? You know, and so then I have to rewrite it and everything else. And you know what happens? I forget. I just go, oh, I'm going to have to rewrite that because it's too salesy. It just has to be like, hey, I'm going to be, you know, it has to be something casual and give people, it don't have a ton of hashtags and a bunch of other stuff. Anything that looks like a sales driven tweet, anybody who's an actual influencer will not post that, you know, like they won't. So it has to be informal and say, hey, I'm on this thing, and you put it in, you give them something that they can cut and paste into that, and it's easy for them to get to. But if it has a bunch of hashtags and it has a bunch of salesy, you know, language or whatever, no one's going to post that, and then they just don't get around to it. So you have to be very careful about how you build that, but you want to build it. You want them to have a library of what they can send out so that they don't have to make it up. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, 100%, Alex. I agree with you. I would also suggest that, Restream has this really nice feature called pairs, which so when Leo goes live, he sends me the Restream pairs link, and then I'm able to pair it up, and then that show is automatically on all of my channels as well. It would be lovely to see something like that built in.
Next question.
Vienna, our friend in Australia. Why do I do that after all this time? But she says, can we sing happy birthday to our own Doug Ferguson, who is sitting here in the panel?
Doug's like, no.
There's a statute of limitations.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree. There's a certain level of, you have to, I think you just have to be there at the time of on your birthday to do it. And this has gotten, it's dragged out a little too far. I do appreciate it, but it's a little weird at the moment.
Yeah, I did miss it. I did miss being on the panel that day. I appreciate it. I do tell my wife I get a birthday week, so I get to do whatever I want for a week, but not that.
All right.
So you have to come back to office hours at a different time to hear our fabulous, incredibly highly tuned and precise version of Happy Birthday.
I think that the thing is, if we're going to inflict that horror on people, it really has to be someone's birthday. It has to be someone right there on that day, because it's a horrible thing to see in person.
To behold.
Next question.
Next question comes from Andre Dolly in Berlin, and he says, having a meeting with German and English participants, and German as the primary language, do I need one extra machine for the interpreter German to English, or do I need another machine for interpreting English to German as well?
I think only both, because you have to have two different participants that are doing the interpretation. So they each have to have their own computer. I mean, theoretically, I guess they could join with a phone, but they have to be identified as the interpreters, for that. It does take a little bit of setup. So you want to send them out invitations, for that. And definitely practice the interpretation before you do it, to make sure you understand how the mechanism works. It's a little tweaky. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I've had quite a lot of experience of events where there are interpreters, and usually there are two for each language, and they swap every 15 minutes because it's very, very sort of taxing on the interpreter. So they need breaks regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen them go as long as 30, but not usually much more than 30 is the outer edge, but 15 is the right number. Next question.
Steve Bodner in Colorado Springs, Colorado is up next. Is it possible using ZoomISO to get a remote participant screen share into a ZoomISO output using only HDMI, the ATEM with Extreme ISO, without using NDI or Syphon?
If we only knew somebody who knew something about ZoomISO here. Oh, wait, Andy.
I've been summoned. Yes, there is a way to do it, and it's the same methods that you would use with a regular Zoom client. So ZoomISO gives you a Zoom instance of its Zoom experience client. So when you either are running in dual display mode and you start a screen share, it goes up on the auxiliary display. If you're running in single display mode, it takes over the gallery view and it presents the screen share content there. So you have all the same methods that you have with the normal Zoom client to get your video out. So you could just set up another display, and what we're doing for Office Hours 2.0 is taking one of those displays, dragging them over to an auxiliary output, and turning it into SDI and out. So as soon as the screen share becomes active, that becomes a relevant input. Otherwise, it's just active speaker.
Next question.
Comes from Charles Klein, our friend in New York City, who's gracing us on the panel today. And he asks, has the Office Hours 2.0 team pushed an exposure chart through the system to see what the pipeline is doing to our signal?
Not yet. Oh, this jumped into the first hour. Let's go ahead and we'll bring that back up and discuss it. That was the first hour.
Sorry,
second hour question. Yeah.
I thought I had it filtered. My bad. I can't move that. Cancel, push, and now here we go. Okay, next one from Sky Gleason, Seattle, Washington. I'm using a new camera to me for the Mad in the Kitchen live on Zoom event tomorrow night. Any suggestions in using a Canon 70D in production?
Practice. the thing with SLRs is just always remember that you want to set it to 1/30th or 1/60th of a second for the shutter. So that's the thing with SLRs. I have a tendency to run my SLRs with aperture, priority, which of course will create a shutter speed that is not appropriate for video. So everything will look stuttery. So just remember that you want to make sure that you're set on your shutter. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm not a big fan of DSLRs that are unmanned. So if you're putting it as an unmanned camera, have it close by just in case you need to get to it as quick as possible.
It was recommended as the ISO cam using Hesmuk's concept of single focus on the plate on the table. So it's just going to be sitting there doing its own thing. So hopefully it doesn't have to look like everything else.
Right. Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm not sure about that camera specifically, but make sure you've got a power supply and that it's going to run for as long as you need it to run.
I would test with every SLR. I don't know enough about the Canon. With every SLR, run it for a couple hours and just make sure it doesn't do anything unexpected. A lot of SLRs can be a little funky after 20 minutes, but leave it for a couple hours just to make 2 or 3 times the length of your show. That's what you want to test as far as just making sure the camera's going to do what you expect. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that camera. It's you have to magic lantern hack it to get clean HDMI out. It's not worth going through the hassle. That's camera from like 2014, so I mean 7 years old. If you want to go magic lantern, you're going to spend a bunch of time getting it to work the way that you want it to work. So I'd either spend the time or get something else.
For a close-up, by the way, I mean what I'm going to be using on Saturday for the close-up to what I'm cooking is an iPhone. Because it's great. What's interesting is I don't really need the short depth of field on the close-up stuff. It actually doesn't make it better. I was planning to go with 3 6Ks this Saturday, but I've actually decided to, after doing some tests, I'm just going to have the one 6K as the main one and 2 iPhones as the close-up cameras, one on the chopping block and one on the cooking area.
I just love how casually you say that. Well, I think I shall use the 6Ks this week.
Exactly. So,
you need
anyway,
you need more accent when you say it.
A bit of a 6K, So anyways, yeah. So the
Great Poupon.
But I decided to go with the iPhones, not because they were better, but they just did what it needs to do really well. And I don't have to intercut them. They're cutting up to a close up, and you're not seeing everything all at one time. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois is up next, and he said, recording videos for a TikTok series today, my instinct is to shoot landscape, even though I know that the final destination is portrait. Should I lean into portrait or to record wide just in case?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I like to do landscape mode more than I do portrait. And it really depends on what you're doing for your TikToks. If you got somebody that's bouncing all over the place, at least don't have to move the camera back and forth. You'll be able to do put it into post and do some tracking on that and go from there. Also, it's not a bad idea to actually squeeze down so you do have top and bottom bars, because if you're going to put any text into your TikToks, you can put it into into those bars rather than put it over on top of video. So there are some really good advantages to doing that.
Go ahead, Bill.
I have an old thing that I do. If they won't make a decision, or I can't decide which is going to be the most important, and it seems like a 50-50 thing between vertical or horizontal, I have a template that is done on transparent paper that I call my Red Cross framing. And literally it ends up, I've got the vertical and the horizontal and the cross in the middle, the center section. I know if I can get a high enough resolution camera, and I usually shoot that with a 6K, I can punch into that and make it a horizontal or vertical. At least I know where all the safe areas are around the shot. So that's another approach to it, but you need more resolution, because if you do that with a low res camera and push it up that much, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, I generally shoot TikTok with a minimum of 4K, and I shoot it always with landscape. And I've even experimented. If you go up to, I think my kids thing, I think is the only thing I could show publicly, but the McDubbies they made it up in TikTok and in YouTube, and you'll see one that we shot we shot it at landscape, and then but the TikTok one, of course, is 9:16, and the YouTube one is 16:9. So I cut both versions of it, there, and I thought it worked pretty well as a test. So anyways, that's I would definitely shoot 16:9 if you have 4K to work with, and then just do just cut into it. Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts is up next. StreamYard finally released Teams feature, adding others to co-host broadcast without needing to give admin privileges. Any reactions or comments about the change?
Definitely the right direction. like that's the way you want to do that is I think that there's lots of, I think eventually what you need to do in an event system is to really allow you to define lots of people as lots of different roles, so that people and make it easier. What you really want is people to be able to define, organizers to be able to define their own roles rather than you having these hard roles of, I'm going to assign this person, I'm going to call it this, and I'm going to give them the access to these features, and have something that's a little bit more granular. I think that the mistake that a lot of folks, you want to have something that's very automatic that people can just do, but the future of events, if we really want events to take over these online events and really move forward, the companies have to stop trying to figure out what the users are doing. They have to, what the users should do. They should build a chute for folks who are getting started, but they should really be looking at, how do I create a flexible backend? How do I create a robust API so that people can design how they want to do it and let them go down that path? The fact that we can't do an editor role in Zoom is nutty, and so that doesn't have all the co-host stuff. It just edits, controls and possibly has special screens and lots of other things there. And so those are the kind of things I think that companies need to think about a lot. Next question.
Johnny S. Diaz in Manila in the Philippines says, are there any reliable DMX transmitters or receivers? If so, can you recommend any?
Go ahead, John.
So I think Alex uses the DMX King. I chose the NTEC, this model here, and this is Ethernet in and DMX, one universe DMX in and out. It's been running for 6-8 months now, super reliable. And then I use Luminaire on the iPad to control it. Works great.
Yeah, I just got it. I think I got it because it was the first thing that came up in Amazon when I ordered one. But I think most people I know are using the NTEC, and I may buy one just to test the difference between the two. But the DMX King works great too. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, I have an opportunity to shoot in a restricted historic space and need a lightweight camera to shoot the space. Lighting shouldn't be an issue. I'd rather use my SLR, but could the iPhone 13 be good enough?
If I'm getting access to a restricted space, I would use an A7S3 or A7S4, to both still and video. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it probably is. But if you have one shot at it, please rent a good camera. Alex's decisions or Alex's choices are good too.
Go ahead, Chris.
Little bit of a shameless plug, but this week at Global Summit, they have had multiple talks on using the iPhone 13 in various, professional ways. You may want to check that stuff out.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And don't discount putting a secondary camera, maybe even a 360 camera on top of the other cameras, so you're getting more shots than you're getting from that one camera.
Good, Bill.
If you need a lightweight rig, I would think about going with an iPhone, the best you got, 12 or 13 hopefully, and then put it on one of those little DJ Osmo handheld super light stabilizers. That way you don't have to lug a tripod through the place. And I've gotten some really good results with that rig, so give it a shot.
If someone gives me access to a place I don't normally get access, or people don't normally get access, I come with as much gear as they're willing to let me take in. I'd bring a LiDAR if they let me. You only get one chance sometimes. If you get multiple chances, you can experiment. I definitely wouldn't consider a phone as the thing that I would use as I only got one chance to do this, I'm going to use a phone. You definitely want something where you have a couple lenses and stuff like that, in my opinion. Next question.
Moving on, Johnny Estias in Manila in the Philippines, back again with, I'm looking to into getting a portable 8-unit 19-inch rack with casters. I need to clear my cluttered desk. Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there's nearly countless companies that'll sell you racks. What I would look for if I was shopping was larger casters than you think you need. Nobody ever bought casters that were too big, and unfortunately, most companies put cheap, small casters on stuff.
Always get 50 to 100% more U's than you think you need. So if you think you have 8 U's of stuff, you're looking at a 12 to 16 U box or 20 U box. Unless you're trying to put it under a desk or something like that, then figure out exactly the maximum you can fit under that desk, because you just keep on adding stuff. That's how this works.
Alex, to be fair, he may have only wanted 4, and he's already
exactly. If you want 4, then you're golden with 8. All right, but I'd still get 12 or 16. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, Ginger Audio has released GroundControl Caster, which has a Loopback competitor, and he has a link there. Has anyone used it? Would there be any harm in having both Caster and Loopback installed? Loopback and SoundGrid don't play nice together, he notes.
Go ahead, Chris.
I literally just clicked my hand, so I apologize for that. But I did take a look at this earlier, and it looks super interesting. But there's something about the website that makes it look like it's not even a real product yet. And I can't tell what that is, but I would recommend people take a look at this. It looks super interesting.
Yeah, it looks like it does look really cool.
It looks a little bit like what's the thing that the PC guys use? Sound potato or
Potato.
sponge?
Yeah, except they didn't call it potato. They called it, but they still kept it with the food. It's like, yeah, we're not gonna do potato. How about ginger? It's like you're just like, really?
It looks just like potato though. It does look interesting.
It does look like that. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I have to agree with Chris. I did have a look at it, and it does look really nice. But the website, I had that same issue. Exactly as Chris, when I looked at the website and how it was built.
What do you think it is? Doesn't look real yet.
It's a theme that's constant. It's a very standard WordPress look that
makes sense.
that you have, and there are certain elements that are in there that are just default, and that does then give you. I didn't investigate further into the site. I could have been really sold and said, okay, no, it is real, but it had that default look.
I think you're muted, Alex.
I'm afraid Alex has lost his picture. He's looking he's not muted.
I can see him. He's not muted, but we can't hear him. Of course, he's not speaking right now.
I think my guess is his picture is going to pop away. No, he's not
probably
frozen.
Can't see himself. He's probably,
He's not
he has that
happy.
look.
Yeah.
Shall we try to continue and ask the
Seems
question? Or
frustrated.
is he back? Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
we
now.
can. We saw you the
dropped
whole
out.
time.
Yeah, so while we were talking, I installed GroundControl to see what would happen. Yeah, don't do that during the show. Just in case you want. I thought like I'd get to turn it on or something, or get to do something. It immediately just like suddenly my whole computer went crazy. Like Zoom sent me like 20 messages. We can't see your audio. So anyway, I thought it would be fun. I thought it'd be fun to try it and see how it goes. I didn't expect it to actually. I just wanted to open the interface. I didn't expect it to actually take over the moment it turned on. So anyway, I was trying to figure out. I was like, what happened to my audio? And I looked at my Scorpio. I was like, I don't understand what just happened here. And but yeah, so just so you know, don't do that during a live show. I've tested it for all of you. All right, next question.
Johnny Estias is back from Manila in the Philippines. Now that Audinate released their Dante Application Library, would it be possible to create an Isadora actor to directly receive Dante audio without the need of a Dante Virtual Soundcard?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll answer the question I wish they asked, which was, is it possible to create an app that just goes left channel, right channel, center, subwoofer? That would be great.
Wouldn't it be great if you had videos that said that?
Oh,
I have so many. You just have to listen to me say it all the time. Left channel, right channel.
As long as I know the dB that it's coming in at, it'd be gold.
Yeah, there we go. All right, next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. Hollyland COSMO C1 announcement seems like, depending on your workflow, it could reduce latency and the ability to eliminate a capture card. It seems attractive. Are we just moving more and more of these kinds of all-in-one solutions, moving toward those?
I haven't. I'm not familiar with the COSMO C1. Evidently, it's people are very excited about it. This is a SDI HDMI transmission system with USB-C embedded video capture. So that's pretty cool. So the idea, I guess, is that the USB-C goes directly into your computer, so that you have a wireless video that then is just immediately part of the feed to the computer. So you don't need another digitizer to make that make sense. I think that makes a ton of sense, for them. The only thing that you have to deal with there is how good is the conversion to bits from the video, and so those are things we have to do more testing on to see how it works. But it does save some trouble, to make that happen. So it's an interesting, and Hollyland has done pretty well at kind of grabbing onto that kind of middle to low cost, wireless solution. And from everyone I've talked to, I mean, I haven't used them. I have other transmission systems, but everybody I've talked to have been really happy with the Hollyland stuff. So has anyone, I mean, I think that Guy, you've used some of the Hollyland stuff, haven't you?
Yeah, we've been happy with it. There's a lot of competitors in that space now. They do have some intercom systems that I played with at NAB, where I did the walk test and decided not to carry them because it failed not too far. But it could just be that was, it's a busy trade show floor with the RF everywhere. So
that's probably the hardest. That's probably the hardest environment. I know that. I mean, we've just used Teradeks for so long at this point that for us, what we buy are Teradeks, and then we rent bigger systems when we need them. But or services that usually, if we're not using Teradeks, we're hiring 3G wireless to do our transmission, and they come with custom stuff. So I haven't played with it, but it does look like a great feature to add. Hopefully Teradek's watching. Next question.
Mark Fisher in Minneapolis, Minnesota is next. What are some backroom chat options for clients to connect behind the mirror during virtual focus groups?
I guess the question is it video or still text? Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. If it's just text, WhatsApp, Signal, any of those would work.
Yeah, obviously we use Unity a lot for those kinds of things where we can just send clients an app that they can put it in, or we build producer rooms for Zoom. So the same way you see behind the scenes from us, we'll take a whole show and even sometimes the multi-views and put them all into a Zoom room, and then have all the clients all jump in and they can see and hear it and talk amongst themselves. And so it's kind of like a little viewing green room for the clients. And that's a pretty common thing for us to do to make sure that they can communicate with us, especially if we're not going to send them something more refined, like comms, like ClearComm or Unity, to make that work. Next question.
Timo Gallegos in Austin, Texas next, and says someone brought cancel culture into the conversation today. Is it an acceptable topic to be discussed in office hours?
Go ahead, Ken.
I would say a most definite no. It's like politics or religion, because the people who are bringing it up, I better stop, because you don't want to hear what I've got to say about people who say.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sky.
I may have misunderstood the question. I was thinking this was a broadcast concept of where are people watching and viewing things. So as a person that creates content, I'm very interested in where the people are gathering, but maybe I misunderstood.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I think that was the question about YouTube, and I believe I did say cancel culture because YouTube is looking at what Facebook has to endure right now. In that case, I think that's a perfectly a good point to bring up. But yeah, if we were to go into what would create cancel culture, that might be something we wouldn't want to delve in.
Go ahead, Rupert.
We may want to be careful about the terminology or the areas that discussion goes into, but if we are involved in creating media online or helping our clients do that, then we at least need to be aware of what's happening out there so we can guide our work accordingly.
Yeah, I think that having a conversation about it maybe someday, but I do think that I tried to just step over it. I admit that I just wanted to move past it. But now that we brought it up, I think that we should probably try to avoid that conversation. I think it's a hot topic that is probably too hot for something that I don't think we need to, from a technical perspective, need to discuss it in too much detail. It's not that I don't have opinions about it. It's just that I don't think that this is probably the right forum to take that on. Let's move on to the next question.
Andre Dalla in Berlin is up next, and he says, I have a relatively powerful Lenovo laptop with discrete graphics card and 3 separate outputs. Would it be possible to start 3 instances of Zoom or Zoom OSC on this machine and use the 3 outputs to pin on 3 second screens into an ATEM?
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I do it all the time. If you have an account that you can open up multiple instances of the account, then you can join that same meeting. There's a little bit of a trick to doing it. The catch is that you can't have Zoom enable that feature because they will have to enable it. on a regular pro account. It'll have to be an enterprise account, I believe. Alternately, you could go virtual machines, but I've found that actually just sandboxing the Zoom app, I can run several instances at the same time.
Next question.
David Paskin here on the panel from Miami, Florida says, in a recent article, Micah Goodman wrote, community is where we go to see and be seen by one another. What are everyone's thoughts on building community on platforms that do not allow everyone to be seen, like YouTube or Zoom Webinar?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, there are people that are introverts and there are people that are extroverts. As an editor, I sat in a dark room living other people's lives and was very excited when COVID came along because everybody was now being in. Yeah. So Chris Fenwick's point was, as a person that was an extrovert that is now isolated, how do we gather together? And again, Chris Fenwick's words, in an affinity group of like-minded people. So I'm very interested in the community of a thing, but also YouTube is a one-way experience. It's not a collaborative, engaging experience.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
It reminds me, see and be seen, radio build huge things with just the be heard as opposed to be seen. And I know this is probably a little more metaphorical than that, but I'm always reminded of Jimmy Buffett, who once said, everybody gets to decide whether they want to be part of the audience or part of the show. And there are different kinds of personalities, and they all have valid thoughts and valid contributions. And so at some point you have to decide you want to step up. That's the key decision break for every individual, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that we look at it as you have a variety of options here. You can always jump into after hours and be part of the conversation, part of the community, and I think that's the integral to what we're doing. I think that so that you have a sense of when we see image, stuff, and a lot of it also has to do with being heard in different levels. So that community can be something that you're heard over text. Or you're heard over audio or video. I do think that the video helps, as far as see and be seen, and I think that. I think the connection between office hours members, for instance, is much deeper for the folks that are turning their videos on in after hours or in office hours. I think that we feel like we know them better. So I think that, but we don't force that to be the case. And even I jump into after hours sometimes without turning my camera on, just to listen in and so on and so forth. If I'm going to start talking, I generally turn it on, and start interacting. But I do think that we want. We want to make sure that net is wide, but I think that you can build a community around it. But I think that the next generation is going to, of things are going to be really about the conversation. And that conversation can live in a bunch of different places. Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany is up next, and he asked, do you have any new information if and then when a Mac Mini with the new M1 chip will be released by Apple? I'm looking via Refurb Tracker for a refurbished M1 Mac Mini, but since Apple's keynote, no regular M1 Mac Minis are appearing.
Go ahead, Jason.
You just have to keep on it. I don't have any information that leads me to think that they're not putting them on the Apple Refurb site. So yeah, just keep on it. I don't think there's a coincidence there.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, these machines are so popular. They are appearing, but then they're very quickly disappearing because, as Alex says, he uses them like glue. But they are amazingly powerful little machines, and so when they do come up, they go very, very quickly.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. He says, before a recent Belfast show, a technician put a grid of colored squares in front of the camera. What's the purpose of that grid?
I didn't see the grid, but I'm assuming it's like an X-Rite grid that was probably put a pocket X-Rite, a pocket camera match or whatever. What that gives you a known value. So you can do a lot, with those grids to, color correct and pull the cameras together and also get a look that you're trying to get out of it. Some of those color grids are actually built into Resolve, so you can actually identify those and get closer. Since Charles is here, I will say closer to a sync. So nothing's ever going to replace a colorist, really tweaking that. But if you're not a colorist, it's a great way to get a head start on getting your colors together. So that's what those are used for. And you can have a Chroma de Mont chart or an X-Rite chart. They come in a lot of shapes and sizes. I was looking for the one that I have, but I don't have it right in front of me. Anyway, so take those into
Jason's got
account.
one.
Yeah, Jason's got one there. That's the Pocket X-Rite color checker, and so that you can actually literally draw a square that samples all of those colors inside of Resolve, and Resolve will pull, make the corrections to get those colors to where they theoretically should be. And it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than someone who doesn't have the colorist skills just to do a rough patch to get them there. Next question.
James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland, back again with, could you recommend good software to use an iPhone as a webcam on a Windows machine specifically?
Go ahead, Rupert.
One of the probably the simplest solution is an app called Epoch Cam from Elgato. You install the app on the phone, install the driver on the computer, hook it up with a lightning cable, and you're pretty much good to go. There are other options out there. You could use NDI that would work best over if you had a wired Ethernet connection. You could also do it over Wi-Fi, but that's just going to get kind of messy, but useful if you needed a wireless camera as a walkabout. But if you want the best control out of the camera, you may want to look at going with Filmic Pro and an HDMI adapter and out of the phone into a capture card. But that's some extra things there that you may not want to get into. But Epoch Cam for a good basic out-of-the-box solution.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, it was covered.
Yeah. John?
The gentleman from Dallas did a very good job. I use NDI on my phone, and I can feed it in to my Windows or my Mac, either one, into OBS and then out from there.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany is up next with video quality improved tremendously since the last time I was here at the beginning of the week. What did you change?
I don't know if we've changed anything this week that is significant other than I think we're all very conscious, especially as we're putting out 2.0. I know I'm getting very conscious of what my lighting looks like and whether I have product on my forehead to get rid of the shine. So I think that all of us are just paying a lot more attention. But I think if you're looking at the HDR feed, I finally kind of locked in my Max CLL and Max Fall to 1,000 and 400 respectively, and that seems to be doing really well on the encode as far as getting us pretty close to what we want. I'm going to do some more experiments with it probably tomorrow, but it's looking pretty good. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Georgia says, last night my iPhone HDMI adapter scan code for camera code was revealed after conversations with Tony Mobley ended last night in after hours. A member tried to use the scan to take control. I think control may have worked this morning. Discuss.
I don't know what that,
So I'm sorry, Alex, the QR code for the adapter apparently showed up during the show last night several times.
Yeah.
And when it did, one of the office hour members, and it might have been Chad, saw the code and captured it. And then in after hours, he tried to use it to take control of the iPhone. And it didn't work last night. But I was wondering if the issues that I was having this morning may have been related to that. And the reason why I ask is because it was showing an image on the screen that was not my house.
Oh, so it was grabbing a camera from somewhere
else. It was not my house.
I don't know how that would be the case. Bill, real quick, we're at the end of the hour.
Okay. I was just saying, as resolutions go up on video images, it becomes now more and more important to look at your scenes and make sure you don't have any readable, machine readable content that people can grab, because I think this can be a problem in the long run. High-res camera pointed across QR code that has some information or a link to something you don't want out there is out there suddenly.
Next question.
James Hutchinson, Dublin, Ireland says, with Last-Light screens, is it that which Last-Light screen is it that you currently use? The only ones I see on Amazon are patterned.
Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
Yes, I use the 7-foot one, and I put a link in the mukana. It's it from B&H.
Yeah, you have to get it in B&H. That's the key. You can't find them on Amazon. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia says, any suggestions on how to connect feed from a mixer with only XLR out to an HDMI input in the ATEM Mini?
sorry, I'm in the wrong panel. Go ahead, Jason.
The answer is very, very carefully. Get a stereo direct box, and whatever you do, be sure that you can balance your impedance. Other than that, good luck.
Next question.
Todd Reynolds, North Adams, Massachusetts, having problems getting a Blackmagic Micro Studio 4K into my ATEM through a bidirectional SDI HDMI converter, not being successful. Since having two identical setups, have diagnosed it down to it's not the camera. Is there a diagnostic path into this problem?
Go ahead, Jason.
There's no diagnostic path. Be sure that you absolutely have the current firmware upgrade on absolutely everything. I have the same camera and it's been a little bit goofy for me. So I just gave up on it, used the HDMI out, and then I used the camera control direct through SDI.
I think you shouldn't have to do this, but you may want to check the camera number in the camera and in the, so I think that you have to have the camera number in, you can actually connect the bidirectional SDI HDMI to your computer. There's a driver for it, or there's a little app for it, and you want to set the number in that converter to the same number that's in your, that's set in the camera. And so I don't think you need to do that with this, but you may. It may be sending out at that. In fact, it almost definitely.
Well, you
will.
absolutely do need to do that.
Yeah.
It
So
won't do
that's
anything at all without that.
I think you're probably
give
just
it
lucky. I didn't do that when I sent those cameras. So you were probably lucky with the first one, and the second one needs to have those numbers set. Yeah.
Also, for your sanity, give the converter its own number, or its own name. You can actually name them individually.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Next question. Last question for the hour.
Yeah, the last one at the end of the regular hour from Douglas Carmichael. For automatic color correction features, do you need Resolve Studio, or is it the free version?
Go ahead, Charles.
I don't know if there's anything as automatic color correction. So I would like to know more about what you're trying to get
I think he's talking about doing the same thing we were just talking about with the X-Rite charge. Yeah.
Yeah. So remember that all you're doing is past what the sensor captures. It's just math, right? That you're applying. You're not changing what you capture. You're just applying math to it. So to get close, like using like the charts and everything, yeah, the free version will get you 90% of the way.
Yep.
The studio version gives you more of like the AI tracking and more of like the eccentric stuff that Alex or I might use.
So to do the automatic version, Charles is absolutely right. To do the warper, the color warper, that requires the studio version. And I don't know if you can nail, I don't know, Charles, you may disagree with me. I don't know if you can really nail the colors without that warper. Like just to really nail them.
It's a lot easier with the color warper, I have to say, because I've been using it more and more when I'm doing like a film feel. But yeah, if you have the time, the color warper will let you really fine tune, and if your calibrated monitor is on point, you will get really, really far.
Yeah.
But you just have to know what you're doing. But the color warper is amazing, like Alex said.
Absolutely. But the automatic, what we were talking about before, where you look at a chart, it'll totally work. All right. Changing subjects now to our second hour. We're going to talk a little bit about Office Hours 2.0. So if you have questions about Office Hours 2.0 and what we're doing and how is it working and what's happening, then definitely throw those into mukana right now. And I think we're going to kick it off by throwing it over to Andy to give us an update of what's been happening secretly on the back end. So there's a lot of things. I mean, it may look the same to you every day, but it has been changing a lot over the last week. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex. I thought maybe something good to open with would just be an overhead view of the cleaned up version of the Isadora file. I'm going to keep it pretty zoomed out, but so those of you who have been following along with this file over the course of time, I've seen it was kind of just a rat's nest of nodes and lines, and now it's all color-coded and organized and commented and segmented and consolidated, so on and so forth. So I've been working this week to try to make this file human readable for other people to be able to look at and work on, so that we can share it and take a look at it. The main changes have been to the SuperSource engine to make it a little more robust in different conditions. I've been learning a lot about how Alex uses mukana by seeing when something breaks because of how the order of steps that he did in the back end to do something. I've also been working a lot on the boot sequence to try to make it easier for the operator to quickly get the people they want in the boxes that they want and then be able to change them if something were to happen there. I've learned a lot more about what is easy to adjust for in the last minutes before the show and what is challenging to adjust for at the very end of the day. So, or the end of the pre-show. So
one of the things one of the things we're learning is that we used to be have a hard edge about 640 being the cutoff for when you get into mic checks, and then we got a little looser. We can't do that anymore. so 640 we have to get back to, by 640, we need people to be in and with their number on no later than 6:40 a.m. because it just takes us a little time on the back end. We put Andy through a bunch of moving things around anytime we come in late. So just for the panelists, that's one thing we learned. Go ahead, Andy.
A couple of other things we looked at. So ATEM this week released the new Mix Effect update, which had a bunch of bug fixes for the Constellation and the OSC controls. So we were having issues with it crashing before. I might have talked about it last week. Those are all resolved. It's been stable the entire week, no crashes, no issues whatsoever. So thank you, ATEM, for that. Huge fix, and it made things a lot easier to use. On other parts of the system, I think, Alex has definitely been doing a lot with dialing in the HDR look. We've been talking about resolution. I think, we're preparing to move the system out of the room that it's in now into another room next week. So we've been starting to have some preliminary conversations about that. I've had some people reach out about graphics and having some high level conversations about, what is going to happen there. My position on it is, do whatever you guys need to do with the graphics. I'm making sure that the engine will be able to actually talk to those and use them when it's supposed to. But I think we've gotten to the point now where the main modules are in place, they're organized, and now we can start to build new functionality on top of better infrastructure. How hard is it to, if like super sources are changed, how hard is it for you to kind of cut those into the mechanics? So the beauty of it is it's all based on the name of the super source. So you can make whatever super source you want, just so long as it follows the 16 pattern that I've shown before, and I'll put it up again. So long as we follow this pattern, again, not this look, but the general flow, as long as these 16 super sources exist and have the names that they currently have inside of Mix Effect, we'll be able to call them and the engine won't even know if there's a change that's been made to them. So they're all referenced by name. And if we have we talked about this super source thing before? Like I don't think we have. I don't think is it worth doing, or would it be better? Yeah, you should. Okay. You should definitely talk about it. All right, let me do a little picture in picture here. This is not necessarily critical. You see all the boxes, but the challenge, right, is that as people are jumping into Mukana, we're adding them to the super source, right? As you're selecting that I want to answer a question, we want to show you, and then as you're answering a question, we want to remove you. We always want the person who's speaking to be on the far left of the super source and the new people coming in to be on the right. So how do you make sure that with all those different through lines of super sources that you can actually sequence that out and have that be correct, because you have no idea who's going to come in and who's going to come out at any given time. So I think that's like n to the n number of super sources that you would need to be able to do there, n factorial, some huge number of super sources that be required to do it. What we found out is that there's a specific subset of those super sources that you can basically play a chess game with and if you move between those super sources, you can get through them all in any order, and it will always have the speaking person on the left and the new people on the right. I'm going to take my video out here, and I'll explain to you how you walk through this chart. Basically, you start on the top row, and you start in the position of the number of people who are going to answer the question. So if 3 people say they're going to answer a question, you're going to start in the one that's labeled 2, 3, 4 in the top area. Now, when somebody answers a question, you move to the right. If somebody is added, you move down and to the left. If somebody's added at the same time as somebody answers the question, you move straight down in this table. You wrap when you get to the bottom, you wrap from the bottom to the top, and you don't have to wrap from the left to the right because we never are going to have like 0 speakers, or we're not going to show more than 4 people at once. So if you follow that path, you can stay in this chart infinitely, and the super source will always have the right person on the left and the new people on the right. So it's kind of crazy how it works, but this means that you only need n squared number of super sources. So in this case, we have a maximum of 4 people we want to show on screen at once. So we only need 16 super sources to do it versus like 64. So it makes it a lot easier to deal with. And I have the JavaScript all for this written up, and it'll be open sourced hopefully by next week.
That's just brilliant.
and of course that was you figured that out instantly, right? It just came off the top of your head.
Yeah, like, immediately, right now, of course. No, this was one of the things that we Jonathan and I
kept on
really
walking in. There was a lot
there.
of furrowed brows when I walked in when they were working on it. They were just like, and there was lots of sketches and trying to figure this out. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was all these papers all over the place trying to figure out what it was, but it was the big thing that we worked on when we were on site was, what is the right way to deal with the transitions between super sources. It's one of the things that's hard about the ATEM, right? It's like and this is where like the third party community is really blown up with, you know, H2R and mix effect and being able to actually design the way that these boxes move. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, the ATEM has a couple, you know, specific transitions that it wants to do. And in order to play nice and get it to play the transition that you want, you have to have things in a certain order. You can't just be randomly doing this. So thankfully, we've had about 2 weeks of testing on it, and it does work. It works pretty well. And it even works for more than 4. So if we have, you know, 7 people who want to answer a question, we just treat that as the case where we remove somebody and add somebody at the same time. So you just move down inside of column 1, and you can infinitely cycle panelists and then 4, 3, 2, 1 on your way out. So, and people can jump in and jump out at any time. And I've been looking at that very carefully for the past 10 days or so, and it does work. So it's very exciting.
That's great. Anything else new?
I think the labs have been good as well this week. You know, it's not strictly speaking Office Hours 2.0, but it's getting there. So if you haven't had a chance to participate in the Isadora labs, we are going over the foundations of understanding Isadora right now, so that when we get to the point where we're talking about 2.0, we have a common vocabulary that we can actually start to say, hey, here's how this works, here's how that works. I'm looking forward to, maybe not next week, but the week following, having maybe another of those 3-day sessions where on the first day, we say, all right, what are the things we want to do for the gallery view? Like, what are the things that we like about Zoom's gallery view that we don't like about Zoom's gallery view, things we wish we could do? And we just write those out and we make sort of a table of rules. Then on the second day, the people who are maybe code oriented join me and we do some JavaScript to actually codify the way that we want that gallery view to work. Then on Friday, we integrate it with everybody back together in Isadora and we test it out and see how it went. So I think those are the kind of things that we can start to do once we have this shared vocabulary, and people who have different interests and verticals can meet on different days and we can build out the functionality together. I spent a lot of time organizing the file and commenting the file so that it would be readable by somebody other than me, so that we can all participate on it. And we'll figure out the right way to do file sharing and things like that, I'm sure. But that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's really important, as many people as possible, we're trying to include in the Isadora and then eventually Universe programming, you know, kind of process or building process, because I don't view this as just like, oh, we're trying to do Office Hours 2.0. We're trying to rebuild how we build shows. I really imagine that every show, whether it's the Hour of Fun, Mad in the Kitchen, the Mobley process, the Belfast method, all of these, eventually we are designing interfaces for how you will cut the show. You know, there's not going to be any, oh, I have to figure out how to learn how to use an ATEM, or I have to learn how to do this. The idea is that we're going to get to a point where we just design, you know, it doesn't take very much. Someone can sit down as we get better at it and as we build more libraries and everything else, we get to a point as we do different shows, we're going to get to a point where we go, oh, this is the module you need. And you put this module in and all these other things work, you know, and then you put this module in and all these other things work. And so we can get to a point where someone in a day or 2 days can just throw together an interface that is going to work for your show. And then you can keep tweaking it. Oh, it'd be better if the button was over here, or this looks over, you know, and I think that, you know, mixing ease of use with flexibility is going to be really powerful, you know, and so, but the only way we get there is to have a bunch of us know how to use, how to use Isadora and Universe. I think that eventually this will find its way into code, just hard coded. This is how it works, some kind of interface there. But I think that Isadora and Universe are super powerful for us to be figuring this out. And I think that we'll keep using it for a long time, just because, anything we can think of, we can throw together in a handful of nodes, you know, as opposed to, you know, committing to code. There's a lot of things we were talking about yesterday. There's a lot of things that code make easier, but you have to know how to code to do it. These are things that, you know, we can figure out and piece together with Andy and Jonathan's help. So it's pretty exciting. On the broadcast end of it, on the broadcast or the pipeline end of it, I think we're settling into an HDR look that I'm pretty happy with on YouTube. If you look at the test streams, I'm going to keep working on it. I got to do some more tests of like playing around with the max CLL and max fall. By the way, what that is max CLL is the maximum exposure, maximum value. Since we're doing 1,000 nit process, I just set max CLL at 1,000. Max fall is the average, the average brightness. Essentially, I mean, there's a little more complicated than that, but and I set that to about 400, and so far that seems to be giving us a pretty good look, at least on my iPhone. A couple things that we're noticing. One is when I've been experimenting. HLG has not been super successful for me yet, but I haven't had enough time, so I've done a couple of these where we were messing around with HLG and it hasn't been great. So we've been using HDR10, in that process to kind of work through that. And that's why I'm using the max, because the HLG doesn't have any numbers. it just is what it is. We are doing the transform. We're transforming from, so when you look at it on YouTube, remember that we're transforming it from 709 to right now we're transitioning from Rec 709 to HDR10, Rec 2020, HDR10 inside of the Rec 2020 space. And so we're doing that in the FSHDR. And then we pass that to a elemental link, the UHD link that does 10-bit, and then we push that to YouTube, which then via HLS, in that process, you can't use RTMP to get it there. And again, I'm actually fairly pleased with the look that we're getting. I highly recommend, if you have an iPhone or one of the newer iPhones or something that handles HDR, that if you're a panelist, you go through the videos that I post and you look at yourself in those videos. We are going to do probably next week. We'll probably do it'll be hard because you can't see it while we're talking about it, but we're going to do kind of a ruthless review, but we're going to talk about it for those of us who have HDR displays, what it looks like on HDR, as opposed to, to give you some feedback on how you're looking on HDR from an exposure perspective, because it is different. One of the things that I'm doing a lot of is I'm flattening off the top of my highlights, inside of the ATEM so I'm going in and flattening the high areas, and then I'm pulling up my gamma, for mine to get to where I want to be, on that. So I think that all of us have to kind of pay more attention to that than we did in the past, to make that work. The other thing we're doing from a pipeline perspective is that we're moving all the gear into the main onZoom area, because there's about 200 feet of cable that has to go back and forth between my office and the onZoom master control. And we suddenly realized that we really want to color correct everybody eventually. So be able to tweak everybody's color and so we want to be able to go in and out of the FSs that we have, the FS4s and the FSHDRs that we have inside of onZoom. To do that, we just didn't want to run a 250-foot cables. And so we're going to get it down to 20 feet instead. So anyway, we're moving that over this weekend. JJ is going to be working on that. And so actually right after the show, or right after tomorrow's show, he'll start moving that over, maybe hopefully get it all done on Friday. So we'll be working on that. That's going to be really interesting, because obviously we want to have the panelists give us the best feed they can, but being able to make some final adjustments to the color will be interesting. And then one of the things that we were talking about that we talked a little bit about on Wednesday and then continued to refine yesterday in the labs is the AV sync. It's going to be mind blowing when we get it working. I mean, I'm fairly confident we're going to get to a point where all the panelists can simply hold up an iPad or phone or Android phone or whatever that's playing a signal that has audio and video on it, and hold it up for a minute, and it will automatically sync everybody to their feed. Like literally it'll just in the mixer, just change all the syncs, change all the offsets, so that everybody just syncs up without having to, so that part of our mic check will be just hold up this thing in the center of your screen and it'll just do it, like that, like what Dennis is showing here. So, but that'll be it. And we'll be able to, pull everybody's sync in without anybody hitting any dials. Now it'll be a mess. I'm sure that everyone will be way off the first couple of days. Like they'll be like, "What happened?" He's like 10 seconds off. But as we refine it, I think it'll really be changing, life changing for a lot of us that are trying to deal with sync. So anyway, and again, I think that the bigger picture, and we'll jump into the questions here in a second. The big picture is that we have the opportunity to redefine the way we think of broadcast. Who's able to do it, how much it costs, what it looks like. There's enough of us that have gathered here together. We've just, collected such an incredible group of people that are experimenting with this that, I think that we're, in the process of really changing the way that this works, and how it works, and making it more available, and actually just make it a lot better than what it has been. I think that we're going to get to a point where it's really artist tools that are doing this, as opposed to you have to understand how to run a big switcher. Just not going to matter, for these conversations. All right, let's jump into the questions.
First one is the one that I misfired on earlier. Charles Klein is up with, has the Office Hours 2.0 team pushed an exposure chart through the system to see what the pipeline is doing to the signal?
We have not. We've just been like trying to get it to work and try to get it through there. But yeah, so what I want to do is, to your point, we'll probably do that sometime next week, where we'll push a Dumont chart, through the system and just see what happens when it comes out on YouTube. We'll just make sure that we know when you're going to be around, Charles, so that you can see it. We want your critical eye on looking at what the transforms are. We have a lot of control because we are passing the signal through the FSHDR. Right now it's going down to 1080 because the FSHD, we don't have a way to go to quad for 12G. I bought a SFP for that I have the receive for it. I just don't have the send for 4K. So as soon as that comes in, which would be next week, we should be able to have a round trip of 4K through the FSHDR. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, because I'm actually looking at the iPad HDR, the new MacBook Pro HDR and SDR on the same screen, and I'm comparing that to my other MacBook and then my regular screens, and I'm trying to see if the shoulder needs a little rounding off, right?
Yep.
But yeah, that's something that we'll be able to see with like the exposure chart, just something simple, like just like one of these things or something.
Yep. Which you just sent in. You now
you
you
just did
have to
it.
go back and look at the feed.
It just happened.
I know. Just leave that on for a little while longer, and we'll have the exposure feed. We can see exactly what it did to it.
Yeah.
So we're going to definitely do some more fine tuning. My goal is to try to get to a point where between the graphics, the HDR, the audio, everything, we've kind of tightened everything up by December 1st, so that we can then spend December tuning the process. We'll probably stick with the same output possibly all the way through December, for the regular YouTube output. But there'll be some point in December where we go, okay, it's time to move over to the new one. Now, the other thing that I have to do is I am going to have to set up an SDR, HDR, and SDR output that in the, that's another piece of this, because the tone mapping in YouTube isn't great, or isn't working all the time. So it's coming out. If you don't have an HDR display, we look in the test feed. We look like we're going through coffee. so we if it's HDR, it looks amazing. I mean, I will say it just getting used to looking at Office Hours 2.0 on my phone and then looking at it, regularly. It's just like, oh, I can't wait to move, and so it really does jump out. And we're not that far away from doing it in 4K. And of course, all that stuff sounds crazy. The main thing that's going to happen is that there's going to be a point sometime in the not too distant future where we can play HDR frames, from stuff that we're working on, and immersive audio at some point in whatever app supports that, so that we can actually talk about immersive audio and you can actually hear it. So those are the things that we're, no one's done that before that I've seen, where you can do training about immersive audio in immersive audio would be super useful, rather than, hey, you can't really hear it, but it sounds really good to us here in the studio. So that's what we're trying to kind of move past. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker in Southend-on-the-Sea, UK says, when do we expect to be able to start turning on names and question text in Office Hours 2.0?
And Dennis, what do you mean by names and question text? These are lower thirds, you mean?
Lower third, displaying the text of the question when the question is being asked, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we hope to have more of those graphics next week. I think it's just a matter of the graphics team, sending us the designs for that. Go ahead, Andy.
I can tell you the good news is we actually are currently grabbing the text in question. Oh my goodness, the question text and the names and the locations from mukana right now. So actually, there's a thing inside of Isadora that just lined up all the information we need on every lower third and every super source. It's just sitting there, and it's ready to pump out into whatever third-party system we want to push it into. But we have the text, we have the names, we have the locations. What's cool about it is it's the way that you define yourself in mukana. So if you go in there and you type out the location the way you want it and all that data, we can collect that, and then we can build the super source based on that. So we'll hear that you're the active speaker in Zoom. We won't use your Zoom name. We'll use the name that you formatted in Mukana. And because we have this database that can basically hash all your information across all your different places, we can get whatever information we want and put that into that graphic. And for the question text, we have a bunch of data beyond just the text of the question. We have, what the tag was for it, who asked it, where they're from, the number of votes that it had, all that kind of stuff. So we can really design a cool looking graphic that's reactive to all that data beyond just the actual text of the question itself. So I'm excited to push that out from Isadora into a third-party system.
Is that specifically the Mukana panel version?
Yeah, it's just the name you're putting in the panel.
Yeah, under your settings tab, you have the ability to set up your display name and your
right.
location.
But there's a delineation between the panel version of Mukana and the general public. The general public.
There's a whole bunch of views.
Yeah, I know.
Of it. Yeah. So, next question.
Next question comes from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington, strangely enough. And he says, Alex, as you have created systems before, how fast is Office Hours version 2 moving compared to your previous systems? And why do you think it has that pace?
It's much faster than we had before because we're using it every day, and we have a programmer dedicated to it almost every day. He's got a couple other things to work on, but Chris is, and he's been working on it for a long time. So we kind of, the hard part is using it all the time really makes it easier for us to, figure out how to make that work and building all the hooks in that are necessary. And some of them take a long time and some of them are fast. So there's some things I ask Chris to do, and next day I have it running, and some of them he has to think about for a little while. But I think we're doing great as far as pacing goes, in that process. So next question.
It's Sky again from Seattle. And he says, Alex, why is Office Hours version 2 important? Can we just hang out on Zoom together and keep interrupting each other like we did in the beginning?
That's kind of a softball.
Yeah. No, I think that, I think that this comes up. It does. People do ask me why we're doing what we're doing. And I have to admit that I feel like we can outdo broadcast at every level. And my goal is to outdo them at every level, that we look better. We have a bunch of remote people that look better. We have a better conversation. We have higher resolution, higher, spatial audio, HDR. I don't want to leave anything on, any opportunity unturned. Now, why are we doing that? Because, everyone just keeps on saying, well, it's just Zoom or it's just this or whatever. And we want to prove that you can have these incredible broadcast experiences without massive amounts of hardware. We want to empower everyone to be able to have these conversations. And what we're figuring out right now, and we're doing it very slowly, and we're kind of working through it, are the mechanics of how to make that available. But as we figure this out, and because we're talking about it all the time and showing everybody here how to do it, I intend to, create revolution. This is we're just lighting a bunch of fires, and so I think that we want to empower people to have their own stories. We have to stop having it be a handful of people who are telling us what to think and how to believe things and what the news is and everything else. We need to give everybody that opportunity, and I think that that's what I'm up to. And so how do we give people those tools so that these tools are out there, but they never look as good? So how do we give them the training and the tools to look just as good or better than broadcast, and then still be able to have their conversations, that are important to them? And so the mixture of the way we interact with our audience, to the way we're doing video, to the way we're cutting those together and building teams, is all about, giving more people a voice to say what they need to say. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back, and he says, does Universe support any sort of scripting language?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yes, it supports C# for scripting.
Next question.
Alex 4D Goldner, who's here in the panel often, is up next from London with, I want to use MixEffect to work on SuperSource designs. I don't have a switcher. Is it possible for me to preview SuperSources on the ATEM simulator in MixEffect?
I believe you can, actually. I mean, you can see it. I think that you can see those, what they're supposed to do inside of MixEffect, if I remember correctly. The other thing that we can do for folks working on graphics is to set up stream. You can look at it inside of Zoom. So we could set up some Zoom where you could jump in and see what the switcher is actually doing while you're working on it. Because we did move over to, the main reason we moved to an M1 Mac Mini away from the iPad was so that people could remote into it. So you should be able to remote into it, but we could definitely set something up where we're sending out some test signals, and yeah, we should work on that. So that there's always test signals running somewhere, or whether we use after hours or whatever, so that you can just see what those things look like. Next question.
Dennis Chapman and Walker here in the panels from South End of the CUK says, I notice my skin tones often look quite gray in Office Hours 2.0. What can I do to improve this?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, actually, I was noticing it on the YouTube 2.0 link, and everybody's seemed to be a little pasty and needed a little more contrast. And so I was curious if there was like a Pro Mist filter or something in the chain that is softening the skin, like that filter that's inside Zoom. But I didn't think there was. So there's a compression going on there.
It depends on the person. So this is where we're really learning a lot about HDR, in that things that look okay in SDR don't pop either don't pop or really pop. So this is where you need to really almost look at scopes, for what you're looking at, that if your skin isn't high enough, probably in the 700, it needs to be, somewhere in the 600, 700 range nits. If you're looking at 1,000 nits, if it's not in that range, you're probably going to fall back into the background. Like for instance, in SDR, Andy looks like he's about even with the lights behind him. In HDR, he looks dark in front of his lights. His lights look considerably brighter than he does, as we, and it's just a very minor difference in the it's just the way that curve works. So I think that we're going to try to give you feedback on it, but the main thing is we are going to try to probably have some labs where we just hang on a person. We're going to do a ruthless review where we give people some feedback, but I think we're going to have a lab where we hang on a person for 10 minutes or 15 minutes at a time and let them play with it to see, so that they can see it through the stream. Because the hard part with this is that you can't see it unless you're looking at the stream and it's 20 seconds behind. And, you have all these, challenges, because it's not being converted until it gets out there. The other thing I've noticed is that you have to restart YouTube every once in a while. If it suddenly looks like it's really flat, YouTube seems to be in some cases turning it off or doing some kind of new tone mapping. And so I've restarted my YouTube 3 times during the show to get it back. So something we're reporting back to them, but it doesn't, the other thing about it is doing HDR on YouTube is almost nobody's streaming live. HDR to YouTube. So we're breaking new things there too. So we're going to be filing some tickets. But yeah, but Dennis, to your point, I think that you probably need a little bit more exposure. And it's probably your gamma. So it's probably not, I don't know, do you have a Blackmagic camera, or what camera are you using for that?
I'm using a Panasonic 4K camera.
Yeah. So you just have to get into the gamma and probably bump that gamma up. It's that center of the curve that if you can get your skin tones just a little higher, they'll probably just jump right out. They're just a little in the middle right now, and that's what makes them look a little bit gray. And then you can also tune your saturation up just a little bit. Mine's tuned up just a little bit on my own because it was flattening out as well. Some of that has to do with me as well. So we have to figure out how to color correct it on our end. That's why we're going to push them all through FSHDRs so that we can sit there and tweak every person and just kind of figure out like what adjustments make a difference, which we don't know yet because no one's ever done this before. No one's patched Zoom, 20 people at a time into Zoom with HDR. We're definitely cutting new ground. Next question.
Our friend JJ McKenna in San Rafael, California, has the next question. Does it make sense to perhaps schedule a green room time so that folks can run through the pipeline to tweak their color ahead of actual showtime?
Yeah, the thing is that we could definitely make that part of what's going on with whoever is there. I turn on the live stream as soon as I jump into Office. So by 6:10 in the morning, we're streaming to YouTube. And usually I send it to Andy, and I try to post it in mukana. So we can definitely have that time where we at least give a handful of people who want to look at themselves. I don't think everybody has to do it every single show, but I think it helps for people who are trying to tweak their system to look at look at themselves through that stream. So we could definitely work on that as far as just hanging on one person at a time to let them do that. And we might just kind of go through the list and who's ready, and then leave it there for 5 minutes every morning, and then let people just sit there and see themselves in the 2.0 stream. We can all keep on talking, but Jason can be sitting there, or Bill can be sitting there just working on it, and they just get 5 minutes with it while while we're in the pre-show. I think that would probably go a long way into pressing us forward. Next question.
Craig McFarland, Boston. Up next, is that auto AV sync mechanism aiding in mic levels as well?
Not right now. Yeah, it's not making any difference. I mean, we're not applying it to that. Go ahead, Andy.
I mean, I think it could in the long term. We have built, OSC LUFS meters inside of Isadora before, and we could, in theory, use that to help us adjust the gain. However, it's always better. I mean, I'm not an audio person, so maybe I'm not qualified to say this, but it's usually better to adjust it at the source, right, versus up the stream of it. So if you're coming in, super distorted, us lowering you down is going to keep you distorted, just make you quieter. And if you're coming in too low, we're introducing noise as we bring you up. So I think philosophically, it will still be better to adjust people's mics at the source versus using gain adjustment down the line. Now, that being said, having some sort of provision that if you're super out of range and we're already during the show, to be able to then bring you down, as a provision, we might be able to do that.
Go ahead, Dennis.
What might be helpful is to have, rather than just the meters, have a source that just gives you a big arrow pointing up to increase your level, down, as people do manually with their fingers at the moment. But I would have thought that'd be something that Isadora could do.
I'm sure we could do something there. Yeah,
and we have actually. We've done a thing that was literally a finger pointing up and a finger pointing down in Isadora with the OSC LUFS meter that's on GitHub. We've done a whole bunch of stuff where you can basically build your own meter by breaking down, basically we give you the data and then you can use Isadora to render whatever look that you want to render. And we push that back into Zoom. So you're absolutely right, Dennis.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Roscoe Jones up next. And Roscoe says, is there a list of software apps that are used behind the scenes in Office Hours 2.0, and maybe a prioritized list based on the skills that would be of the most benefit to the Office Hours 2.0 project?
Go ahead, Andy.
I do have a list actually, and I can post that list if it would be helpful. I think that the big three right now are Universe, Isadora, and Mix Effect. They do the majority of the work. So having familiarity with those will be helpful. Then there's some more niche things like the multi-view protocol inside of, not the multi-view, sorry, the routing protocol inside of the constellation, knowing some of that TCP stuff. But there's things that are a little more niche than that. Even things like Osculator, Apple Scripts, Black Syphon, Zoom OSC, and ZoomISO to an extent even as well, right?
What's the difference? What's the difference between Black Syphon and Syphon?
So Syphon is a framework in macOS for sharing video between applications. Black Syphon is a program that uses the Syphon framework to take that frame and export it to Blackmagic hardware. What's cool about it is that
Syphon can't do that on its own.
Well, Syphon is just a framework. Syphon is basically just a system where you can come and say, hey, I want the video frame that belongs to this application. And what's cool about it is that, with NDI, what's happening behind the scenes is that video frame is getting copied from the GPU to the CPU, being put on the network, and it's coming off the network, being copied back from the CPU to the GPU. With Syphon, it's the same video frame that one application is writing to that the other application is receiving. So there, in theory, is zero latency. It's a shared memory buffer between applications. So whereas, if we were to take the NDI feed coming out of ZoomISO and convert that to SDI, we'd have to do all of that, and then we'd have to convert it. Black Syphon isn't a converter to Blackmagic. It is literally just exporting the video frame from one app to another by reaching into that app, grabbing the video frame, and putting it out the other end versus making a copy. So it's very, very low latency and very efficient.
Next question.
Comes from Andy Carluccio, who's just speaking. How has the experience of cutting the 2.0 show been for Dennis?
Dennis?
Yeah, it was quite straightforward. The interface was good. Obviously, it was the first time I'd seen it, and I was able to cut the show quite comfortably. There were a couple of times I pressed the wrong button. I discovered that pressing the right mouse button activated the buttons when I didn't expect it to. And where there were questions that didn't have any hands, there wasn't really anywhere to go with the super sources. So yeah, I sort of discussed this with Andy on Discord while we were actually doing the show. And so obviously there is more to be done, but yeah, it was a good experience.
I do think that, it's going to be really interesting as we get really good at this, and we get more people into it, of being able to, the more I think about the idea that we could just design interfaces for people to interact with specific shows, the more excited I get about it, because there's so much of, you got to figure out how to do this and you got to figure out how to do that. And everybody can have, eventually, as we get better at using Universe and Isadora, everybody can have it the way they want it, and we can keep on building modules that are, this is a module that will do your super sources. Like we could have a super source module that is, if you like the super sources that we do, you can, add this and it'll just do that thing, for your show. And then we could build other ones like that as well. And so I think that there's a real opportunity to give people a whole new level of power over what they're doing. Next question.
Comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris says, for 2.0, how does the text look for questions in HDR? Or how is that screen real estate going to be handled?
I think we'll find out next week. So as we do it, generally, we try to have questions. I'll let Charles jump in. Go ahead, Charles.
No. Oh. I actually had a question to ask that I wanted to ask before is the pipeline for the video and the graphics separate? Because obviously if we're piping white type and your tone mapping is to 1000, we're going to have that issue from before where the white type is just super bright. So maybe there is a separate chain just for the graphics so we can tone those back down to
currently
an average level.
Currently no. So you'd have to really think about what gray levels or white levels that you're using. But I do think that we have to get to a point where we are promoting the, and this is something I've been thinking about, and it's a good point to bring up, is that we have to do the conversion of all the Zoom inputs separately from the graphics, probably in the next couple of weeks, where where we're cutting it, but it's not the program that's getting cut. It's an ME that is cutting everybody and then promoting them and then handing them back, to the graphics. I haven't gone down that far because it's going to take some thinking, to do that as far as that promotion goes. So right now, and I don't know when we'll get to that, but we do have to figure that out. The first place I'm worried about doing it is in playback, that playback goes to goes out and goes through the doesn't have to be converted. But then the next step will be graphics, and this may require tools that we don't have yet. Like we have to figure out if we're going to color correct every person and then hand them all back. Because what we may want to do at some point is, have the whole system running in HDR. So right now the system runs in SDR, and then it's promoted as a program out. What we may want to end up doing is routing. This is an experiment we may do once we get everything moved into the control room. Push everybody through and convert them to HDR and then feed them back to the switcher. So the switcher now is sitting in an HDR space, which is a challenge with the constellation on its own. Now anything that you add into it works. So you have to process all of the individuals to HDR first, or prepare them for that. And that has its own challenges because I don't have enough FSHDRs to do that. I can color correct them, but I can only convert up to 8 of them, and really only 6 because we have 2 that are being in constant use to true HDR as it passes out. So we have to kind of figure out what that model looks like in that process. Next question.
Eddie Martinez in Palo Cedro says, next step gear purchase beyond ISO Pro Extreme, 6K cameras. What would be the next level for Blackmagic design gear purchase?
Go ahead, Charles.
So this is, I've been hearing rumors of a 6 primary color space, which is going to be like a CMY and RGB combined. And that's just changing the math in the background, but also the way. Now, this is purely for HDR, and also the way that in Resolve, there's in the color page for Resolve, just the HDR panel, and they've broken it up into, I believe it's black, dark, shadows. Then you have your light, your highlights, and your specular, and having a new center panel that has 6 color wheels to just control those things, plus adding that to, that's like a 6 primary color space, would be my main big purchase. And this is something that I've heard some rumors about. There's a few colorists that are talking about it, but if something like that was to come out, they could just take my money.
Yeah. I don't know what the next, I was kind of looking around trying to figure out what the next Blackmagic thing is. I mean, those are the core things. Deciding whether you need some monitors that will let you see in, the 12G monitors are pretty good. You might still want the, solid solution of a true HyperDeck that's there. The HyperDeck HDs are a lot less expensive than they used to be. So those are other options to kind of think through. You can get key fill out of them so you can play them out. So those are some things to think about. Next question.
Next one comes from David Paskin here on the panel from Miami, Florida. Curious about the producer audience experience. Are there plans to open up the experience a bit so that there's less friction to participate, or is the friction core to the quality of the production?
Go ahead, Sky.
I think it's similar to the question we talked about earlier. How much do you want to participate versus observe? And to get to the show component, it takes a little more exercise, and participation has to be intentional versus just being observatory and consuming a thing. So, but this again is Alex's vision, so I'm trying to catch up to.
There's a bunch of tools in mukana that aren't complete. Because they're not incomplete, I make it hard to get in. So and so it does keeps the system clean because the troll suppression tools aren't done yet. So the tools that we're putting in are like ball peen hammers when it comes to troll suppression, and so they're really pretty brutal. So and when we put those in, we can then open it wide up because it won't matter. Like it'll be almost impervious, to things that are out there. But right now I protect us from that by making you go over the mountain, across the rickety bridge, and up through the dangerous forests. That's how I protect us from most of the outer reaches, is just obscurity. Next question.
Robert Grader in Rockaway, New York, I believe. What are the numbers referring to that are next to your names? I'm sure I missed this.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so these are your PIN numbers, and it's the one piece of data that we need in order to be able to sync your information about Zoom with your information about mukana. So, for example, somebody turns their video on inside of Zoom. Zoom OSC gets a command that comes into Isadora, and it says, hey, Alex, Lindsay, Novato, California, 1080, turn their video on. So that goes in, and then we grab the information from mukana that says, hey, there's a person on the panel named Alex Lindsay who has 1080. Maybe he doesn't have the location in his name. Maybe it's formatted differently. Maybe he's not using pipes there. He's using comments. Doesn't matter. 1080 matches. 1080 matches. That's the same person. Now play out a graphic that says Alex has turned his video on. Hooray! Right? Like, we have the ability to hash all your data between the two databases now because we have a common entry between the two. So the beauty of the PIN number is that it can as long as it exists in your name, I can sync your mukana records with your Zoom records and have a cohesive, piece of data about you. Those PIN numbers go up, for example, when you're doing the hand raises, right? So when you're raising hands inside of mukana, I am getting a CSV of those PIN numbers. I then use those PIN numbers to go find your input numbers to the constellation to then tell Mixeffect to create a super source based on those input numbers, right? Because Mixeffect doesn't know your username, Mixeffect doesn't know your PIN number, doesn't know anything about you except what input you should be in the constellation. So we have to translate your identity into an input number in order to be able to use it with the super sources. So the PIN numbers are the core of all of that.
Next question.
JJ McKenna, San Rafael, says, with the 4 updates that ATEM applied to Mixeffect this weekend and Monday night, are there any other panelists using it in their workflow, and what has it optimized for them?
I don't know how many other people are using it, but it's super powerful. Go ahead, Andy.
I mean, you probably saw the new Stream Deck profile. I know Mitch Hill showed that earlier this week. That's all sitting on top of OSC commands, same OSC commands that we use. So while you might not be using Isadora with Mixeffect to try to drive all this behavior, if you're using Companion and you have access to those OSC commands, we're actually sharing a backend now, because ATEM, that's the power of it, right? Like, once these applications, and it's a really powerful paradigm, I think, in the industry that Office Hours has really been pushing forward. Once you start to open up your app so that other things can talk to it and it can talk to other things, your use cases explode exponentially, right? Like, Mixeffect was already fantastic for creating super sources and doing the things that it did inside of its own ecosystem by itself. Now that we have the ability to do all the things that we can do to it from other applications, we've added functionality to Mixeffect that's 10 years ahead of where it could have been developed by itself.
Yeah, and I think that by us playing such a really difficult, hard game that is absurd, it's pushing all of our partners to, up their game. So Universe is fixing things, Isadora is fixing things, Mixeffects is fixing things. We're building out ideas and processes and everything else and figuring those out. And so the idea is to get out as far out as we possibly can. You may only use 10% of that, but that 10% wouldn't exist if we didn't push it as hard as we're pushing it. And so we'll keep doing that. It's kind of this, I often refer to this as like the F1 approach, which is that, when you see an F1 race, and you're like, why do they bother? It's so they can test things that eventually might end up a simplified, commoditized version of that will end up in your next car. But they're figuring out, they're way out in this bleeding edge, figuring out the outer edges of what it can do. And that's what we want to be constantly doing is, taking an F1 approach to what we're doing and doing things that don't make any sense and people aren't asking for it. But that's been my whole history is not doing what people ask for, but doing things that get them to ask for it. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with how are we handling Windows licensing on the Universe side? From my experiments with Windows 10 for workstations, it needs either a Microsoft account or a domain account.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so you unplug when you're setting up Windows, you unplug it from the network. You go through the setup prompts and you say, oh, you don't have a network. You can't connect a Microsoft account. Would you like to use a legacy account instead? And then you say, yes, I want to do that. It says, are you sure? We have a lot of really cool things with a Microsoft account. And you say, no, I'm really sure. You put in all your credentials and it says one more time, after entering all that, are you really sure you don't want to use a Microsoft account that you can't use because you don't have an internet connection? And then you can use it without an account.
Very good. Next question.
One of the greater explanations I've heard lately. Douglas Carmichael is up next, and he says, what sort of sound effects will we be using for Office Hours 2.0? Do we get the whoosh?
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, gentle sound effects. Hopefully only things that move the story forward, because it could be a thing that could get in the way quickly.
We definitely don't want form to get in the way of function. We do want to experiment with some things. So as we start working, right now, I'd be happy with just better super sources and some little bits and pieces of things. We're hoping to have a countdown clock on Monday. We're hoping to do a bunch of other little things like that. One of the things I want to do is start exploring some spatial experiments, somewhere in the future as we find a platform that can support that. So that you can hear that, even if it's binaural, where you can just hear things. If you're watching with the headphones, you can kind of hear it moving around and doing its thing. And so, sweepers we might use sweepers to do something, or sweep in and sweep out, but we want you hear it coming from behind and going across, and that type of thing. So subtle stuff, but also things that continue to push the envelope. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back. I remember it being discussed that intro music for Office Hours 2.0 needs to be 30 seconds or less. Is that accurate? I produced an extended cut that is 2 to 3 minutes in length.
Yeah, I like getting to the protein really fast. So 30 seconds would be the outer limit. Like that's the outer limit. It's 10 seconds. Yeah, as Chris is giving me hands, but 10 to 15 seconds is more likely, maybe even 5. It's just really I think that we're past that. That's a vestige of the past. Now we may use it in the tail end for 2 or 3 minutes. Just something that's fun as we finish things up, or we do other things like that. That might be something that's kind of a fun thing to do. We used to do that with Twit. With Twit, there was a long version of the Twit theme, and we put all kinds of stuff at the end. And if you listen to it, we would take stuff out of the pre-show and put it into the post-show, and funny things and all kinds of other stuff. And so putting in little Easter eggs like that might be a lot of fun. Next question.
James Hutchinson, Dublin, Ireland. Looking at the HDR feed today, I noticed the backgrounds really pop, especially Bill's. I see a lot more detail than on the SDR feed. How is this possible? The Zoom feed at Bill is not HDR. It's just a standard feed.
It's funny. HDR is a funny thing that you do see more when we stretch it out. It's in there. It's just in the blacks, that there's still some stuff there that we can pull out of it. And it's really just the colors are a lot more vibrant, in what we're doing. But it is amazing. Now imagine if we get to a point sometime when the source feeds are all 10-bit and they're all coming in as log. Like that's this is the, we're going to remember talking about this when we were just doing it over Zoom, but there's going to be some point where all the panelists are passing log information, at 4K back to us, and it's all going to get then converted, and then it's going to look amazing. Like we'll look back at the cool stuff that it looks like now, and we'll be like, yeah, that was cute. That was cute when we did that. And when I say that, I mean I'm shooting for middle of next year. We're at a much different level of what of the game we're playing. So we're trying to move that way. Go ahead, Chris.
If I hadn't watched you do 1080p, 15 years ago, I would say you're crazy today, but that's something tells me you'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that I'm thinking about is the low latency versus the high latency. So again, having hosts send two feeds to us, one that's at real time that we can discuss, and the other one that is, a couple seconds behind, that is a different feed, either a Zixi or SRT or something like that is sending in a big file, to us at really high quality, so that we can take that, and that might be the bridge, that we talked about before. That might be a lot of other things. So, that's what we're kind of thinking about right now is, and then if you think about the way that we've abstracted all this editing, that could be something that's a module. Like the high quality post-production module is something you just add into the system, and you feed it a couple things, and now the editor is sitting there watching it in Zoom, cutting it. Everyone here is feeling it as real time, but the processing is all happening on the back end, and no one thinks about it or needs to be technical to figure that out. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, is up next. He says, can we add an automatic animation in Isadora with a hand model Mickey? So every time someone says it depends, the hands pop up as an overlay graphic.
Dibs on the animation.
Yeah, I hope that our graphics team keeps on experimenting with it. So, I mean, once we get through the basic stuff of getting it done, throwing in little graphic experiments, I think will be a lot of fun. Next question.
Alex Fordy Goldner in London, up next with what system will be displaying data-driven elements? Text for questions, lower third, something?
I think you just muted yourself, Alex.
Went the other way. So we're going to use, I think Tuomo is working on using his system. So the problem with his system is that it just, Pixel Core used to be called PXC. And so it's very close to SPX or and so my brain keeps on wanting to say PXE, but SPX. So SPX graphics is what we're kind of leaning towards right now as far as using that. Tuomo's working on that. So I think that our goal is to be able to send instruction sets in there. And again, one of the big advantages that we have related to that is that we have a developer who's really committed to what we're doing and ready to be part of that development process. And so it should be exciting. But we're going to keep on experimenting with it and see what makes sense. Go ahead, Andy.
You got it.
Okay. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up for our final question in the regular queue with, does the 090 master control room have a backup power and cooling? What are the disaster recovery plans for 2.0?
Go ahead, Andy.
The disaster recovery plan for OH 2.0 is to use OH 1.0. Just go live in Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
And it sounds silly, but the fact that 2.0 is a spectator on the conversation versus pulling really you all out and putting you into its own system means that it literally is that easy. That's the reason that we can do concurrent streaming now between 1.0 and 2.0. And it's the reason that your disaster recovery plans is to have somebody hit go live to YouTube, who has the right permission to do that, and it'll work. So I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and to be clear, eventually we're going to build out the way this works. What's really exciting about it is that eventually we can build out two locations that aren't even close to each other. They could be on opposite sides of the world. Multiple people could have access to being able to cut it. Obviously, we want to only make one at a time, but so we can actually make this system far more robust than many of the other systems we built, because it's going to be in the cloud. We could theoretically have multiple instances that were up. I mean, if it really got to a point where we needed to be that rock solid, we would be able to have lots of instances up, a controller talking to all of those instances talking to hardware, or eventually all the stuff will be in the cloud. I mean, I think that we're, you know, I just want to make sure we're clear. I mean, everyone thinks I'm crazy because we're spending, you know, we have what's going to be end up being probably $100,000 of hardware running this thing. I mean, at the rate we're going, because we figured out, you know, if we want to color correct everybody, I need, you know, $40,000 worth of hardware to do that. So anyway, to color correct each person, so we got to figure that out. But the and that's to add to the 30,000 we already have. So that's and it won't take much longer to get to 100,000. Yeah, exactly. The issue is that it allows us to work on it right now, and it allows us to interactively go, oh, I'm just going to plug this stuff in. I'm just going to do this thing. I'm going to add color correction, like having the level of color correction that I have in the FSHDR and be able to load LUTs and be able to do all those controls. I don't know what I could do. I don't know where I could do that in the cloud, you know, at HDR and 10-bit and everything else. It's just, I can just route it into that. It's money, but it's doable. I know that that'll eventually be all in the cloud. I just don't know when. So I don't want to wait for the next year or 2 years to figure this out. What we're figuring out is the process. Like, how do we actually approach this, and how do we actually, what software or hardware that we do it on is going to be less impactful than the you know, the entire workflow of what we're doing. So I think that we're yeah, I think that we have a lot of backup. Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you know, to my earlier point, backup and scalability have a certain tie-in, you know, as well as kind of as you're saying there as well. So, you know, eventually there could be, we're figuring out the blueprints, right? Like a lot of what we do in the cloud for production follows a blueprint that we figured out years before, right? With, you know, vMix and all of that we were using terrestrially. Okay, how do we migrate that to cloud? I think we have an opportunity right now to do rapid prototyping with hardware that's maybe ahead of, you know, where we can do up there. But once we figure it out, and we've already started to see, you know, some of the basics of this, you know, people have ZoomISO running in the cloud right now with Isadora already.
Right.
Very exciting to see where the next steps of that are going to be. So,
and I do think that iterations of what we're doing in office hours being done in the cloud are already happening, and I think that they're going to continue to happen, and I think they're all going to run in parallel. So we're going to be, and my only request is that people take the nodes and everything else that we're building, that they come back and show people how they're using it. You know, like it's not, you know, it's something that we're trying to publish and make sure that everybody understands how to do. You know, all I'll say is you have the opportunity, if you learn how to do these things, you have the opportunity to push karma back into the system. You know, we'll show everybody how to do it within months. So if you're ahead of something, you're only going to be ahead by a couple months, and you're losing the opportunity to become a hero inside of the group that's showing off what you know and how to do it. And people go, oh, I should hire that person, or I should hire this person because they already know how to do these things. That's the opportunity when you get ahead inside of our group, is to share it back into the group, because it helps elevate your stature. And when you're looking to hire people, when you're looking to get hired, when you're looking for help, when you're looking for all those things become easier when you're sharing stuff back into the system. So my suggestion is to do that. That's the opportunity, because we'll be publishing everything. So we'll be showing people how to do, you know, all the things that we're doing and everything else. So that if you're ahead, you won't be ahead for very long. So you might as well take advantage of being ahead and push it back in and get the notoriety for it, than to hold on to it, because it's investing in people is way more efficient than secrets, just in case you're wondering. You know, like it's, you know, pushing that back in and building your network by showing people stuff is going to be way more than anything you can get out of being a little ahead for a little while. So, anyway, so those are things to kind of think about. I think that we're going down a pretty exciting path. You know, I think that I mean, it looks really good. I mean, I keep on going. I can't believe I'm just taking Zoom feeds and having them go to YouTube, and it looks this good. I mean, it really pops out, you know, in YouTube. So, and I think that we're just starting to figure it out. So next week we're gonna do a ruthless review, and we'll look at it through HDR. We are gonna start opening it up in the mornings, so that, you know, we'll just cut to somebody, you know, and leave it on and let them know that they're in 2.0, that they're there and they can look at themselves and make adjustments to their lighting and so on and so forth. I think as we figure that out, as we start to triangulate that look and feel, this show is going to look like unlike anything anyone's ever seen. You know, like I think that we're really going. I have to warn people now in second hours that, you know, average investment is very high in the panel. Like you just, you know, if you're coming in for a second hour, coming in on your laptop may not be the best approach. You know, so it's, you know, you might want to think about bringing a little bit more of your game. So anyway, Great work. Thanks for the great questions, both in the first hour and second hour to our producers. Fantastic work. And thanks to the panelists. We had a big panel today. We have to figure this out because we keep on getting panels that are bigger than the system. so we have to, so we're working on that. But thanks to the panelists who have contributed so much back to everybody. And tomorrow we're going to have Hovercast. So they produce events. I think it's going to be really interesting. So make sure to come tomorrow. It should be a fun second hour. And now, jumping into after hours.